We do all kinds of things here at Word in Your Ear.
We do podcasts.
We do video casts.
Quizzes.
Crowdcasts with famous authors.
And we can guarantee to make your next birthday one you will never forget.
There's only one way to make sure you get all of this, you get it in full, and you get it first.
And that's by becoming a supporter on Patreon.
Details here.
Word in Your Attic. A Zoom with a View.
We're delighted to be joined by Simon Garfield. I think I first became aware of Simon in the early 80s when I think you won some student journalism contests. I think you did. I'll spare your blushes about that. but particularly came to attention working on Time Out, interviewing absolutely everybody, and then went on to write books about the music business and about Radio 1. And now it strikes me, he writes books about absolutely whatever he feels like writing books about. Most recently, dogs,
typefaces,
yes, absolutely,
colours,
stamps, the Second World War, all kinds of things. Is that a fair description of what you do, Simon?
Yeah, I mean, hey, folks, it's nice to see you.
Lovely to see you.
You know, you complimented me. I've got to say how much I've enjoyed seeing your Word in the Attics over the last year. Yeah, it's sort of, sounds like a terrible cliche, but I am very lucky to be able to do all this stuff. So I think even when I began, my first published journalism, it was sort of the LSE and then Blitz magazine. Long forgotten, long loved Blitz. Always sadly, I mean, God, I hope the editor's on with you, but always a poor man's face then, always a poor man's face now.
What kind of people were you interviewing for Blitz? Can you remember?
Great. Yeah, well, I mean, oddly, that's how I got my job. So I interviewed, I did very early interviews with, the one that I remember, because I think I went up to Hull to see them, was Everything But the Girl.
Oh, right. Okay.
And they were both up there, and it was kind of great seeing Tracy. And there's a picture which I think we took up there of them sort of in the bedsit somewhere.
Right.
One of the really old. But the way I got my job was on Time Out, was I interviewed Debbie Harry for the David Cronenberg film, Videodrome. So she was in a very relaxed mood. So she'd moved into films at that point, and it just meant that she was actually happy to talk about the music and everything else in a way that she wasn't before, because she felt it was sort of a bit in her past. And I don't know whether Blondie had split by then. I think they had. So it was just a very open interview. And then what happened was one of the editors of Time Out, then a guy called Jerome Burns, saw it and said, "Can we buy it?" Which was quite rare, considering Blitz was sort of on sale next to Time Out, on the stand. And I said, yeah, and they were okay with that. And then after that, they thought, oh, well, if you can get an interview, I didn't get it. Obviously, it was a PR thing, and the editors of Blitz organised it. But they obviously thought, okay, well, here's someone sort of a bit new and young, and I was just out of university. So I began working on the music listings, just calling everyone out. I mean, now it seems ridiculous, but it's sort of calling people up.
Who was on?
Are you playing Friars Aylesbury on Thursday, or is it Friday?
It was. And it was always, so we had to call up. I mean, obviously the marquee or people sent in their listings, but it was the smaller ones.
Yes.
Basically, we sometimes kind of had to call them, because obviously, we were trying to provide a service. They obviously wanted to be in Time Out as well. But we had, I wish I could remember what they were. So they were inevitably, this was the early 80s when I joined Time Out. And there was a huge live circuit in very small venues, as you guys both know. And they were often the same bands who were never going to make it be bigger than that very small venue, but they made a fantastic living by playing every day and just going around. Yeah. And we always had the same line underneath, but describing what they
hard
were.
Gigging four-piece, was it? No.
Exactly. It was something like, it was tuneful R&B with a tinge of...
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. And they would always be happy with that. And occasionally they would call out after a while and say, well, we used to play that, but now we're now we're
Yes.
punk.
No,
or whatever.
Yes.
Now we're edgier.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's brilliant. Can you remember the traditional question we always ask people? Can you remember what record player or music playing machinery was in your home when you were a child?
Yeah, I had my parents had bought this. I mean, I'm sure half the people that you've had on have answered this. A blue vinyl Dansette.
Right.
It looked like a suitcase.
Yeah.
It was one that you lifted up the lid.
You could rack them up on the top and put the arm
Exactly.
on. Select.
Exactly.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was 3 speeds as well at that point. I'm sure it was. And speaker grill at the front, a sort of beige speaker grill. And that was fantastic. I mean, that's all I needed. And that lasted me pretty much, I mean, unbelievably, until I was 18. I think I was still cranking out stuff on that. Obviously, I had, the radio and the tape player as well. But in terms of the record player, I think that was it.
Playing these really expensive stereophonic records on your little tiny tinny speaker.
Yeah. My brother in the next door room had a much better set. I think with speakers that detached. Oh, right, so you could take the whole thing out and then they detach and then you could sort of put them and you get the full sound. I mean, he was my sort of musical tutor, I suppose. He was much older. He's no longer alive, much older than me. And he was like 4.5 years older than me. So it was through him that I actually got into Rod Stewart and T-Rex and
so were those your first?
What were the first ones you were listening to?
What were your first records? You haven't kept any, have you?
Going back to the Dansette,
right.
Okay. What I remember, and this will have a relevance to what comes afterwards, I imagine, is a record that my parents must have bought me when I was, 4 or 5, that had a train on it. It was like, what are those things called? Oh, a diorama. So basically, it was the equivalent of a 45 vinyl diorama, and on the inside of the label, it had a train which basically had different levels of motion sort of going through it, if you can imagine, coming out of the chimney. So when it went around, it looked like it was a train on a track. And that for me was just a magical thing, really. I don't know I've got no idea what the actual song was, but that for me was the extraordinary thing. I'd love to know if any viewers can remember that. I mean, that's long gone, of course. Yeah. And I just remember listening to my brother's records more and more, and it was really kind of punk for me that where I really sort of got into buying my own stuff. And he thought punk wasn't really anything. He was passing phase. It didn't hit him in the same way. It hit me when I was 16, and so for a formative time. And for him, he was 21 already. So that formative time had passed. So some of his musical taste was already in cement, and mine was still moving. So of course, where do I have them? So I mean, this was really early.
Oh right.
Oh yes.
Yeah. Which was a glorious thing. And then this was a bit later, but I found this recently, which was
which Rosillo's single
records.
Yeah, that's I Can't Stand My Baby.
Yes.
So that was sort of pre-hit, and that was. I mean, I brought along some stuff that's rare or fairly rare. I mean, it's not it's not 100 quid rare. It's 20 quid rare or something. But this was on the original Sensible Records label, so it's always nice to see these things there as well.
All right.
And then I don't know what, I mean,
where did you? Oh, of course.
Where did you get all? Oh, that's great.
Is that the original toilet door?
Yeah, you remember this one?
Yes,
So I was here we go, and it folds
Okay,
out.
this is rare. I can do this, Simon. Hold it up. I've got one into view.
There you go. And you had it
really left out there.
That's it.
We played Punk Snap.
So it was all those. Listen, I've got a. Oh yeah, and then anyway. So the joy for me, as it sort of remained in later life, and I know you were talking about this, David, when you did your 50th special. It's the acquisition, isn't it? It's not. It's not just hearing the music, but it's wanting to have that in your collection. So I hung around Rough Trade and anywhere like that, and it was a classic John Peel experience. I would hear something, and then there would be a rush to Rough Trade, and they would sell out the next morning, having Peel had played it that day. And the other place I used to hang out, which I don't know whether you'll remember, there was a place in Newport Street Market, if that's what it was called, in Leicester Square. And it was a covered market. Yeah. And Shane MacGowan used to have a little sort of, he used to sell records there. And there were sometimes kind of slightly dubious ones.
Get away.
And sometimes they were Pogue records.
Right.
So this is a white label of Dark Streets of London, and the band played Waltzing Matilda, and it's got Stan Brennan's contact number on there.
Oh, wonderful!
So you
bought this Pogue stuff. You
bought that from Shane MacGowan?
No, this is Pogue.
Wasn't he in the Nips at that time? Was he
the Nips, exactly? And I remember the other thing he sold me, which is obviously a couple of years later, was the Specials had a famous, which I think now is kind of officially released. You can get it on Spotify, Live at the Moonlight Club in West Hampstead.
Oh, right.
And he had a bootleg of that, and then bootlegs were the other things for me as well. I mean, I just thought that was so great. Again, now oh God, I'm beginning to sound old.
The Nips put out a fantastic compilation album. I can remember with a brilliant title. It was called Bops, Babes, Booze and Bother. Do you remember that? It just sums up their entire world perfectly.
Yeah. So I know anything like that, but anyway, I've got a. I mean, again, just sort of going through the stuff, because I know, the kind of the glory of the last year, and God knows there haven't been that many, is sorting things out and finding stuff and treasuring stuff, I suppose, as well, that we thought, oh, it's just going to be there, and it is always be there, but just sort of. So here's a quiz for you. I think this might be more Mark than David, perhaps. So I'm going to show you a B side. You have to tell me the A side.
Oh, I can't read.
Can you read? I can't read actually.
You know where you went wrong. It's called "You Know Where You Went Wrong." Is that right? It means nothing to me.
What year are we talking about?
I think we're talking 80s for sure. Mid 80s.
Okay. I wonder if that's an independent label. I don't know the other. You're gonna have to tell us.
It's a white label. It's actually the biggest pretty much now back at number one, I imagine. And Mark used to work with one of the guys in the band.
Oh, Pitch Up!
Is it Pitch Up Boys?
Yeah. So here we go.
What is it?
Oh.
So what's the A side then?
Oh, it's a sin. Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
So
it's a white label. Wow.
I don't know how I got this white label.
You probably got a Time Out, did you?
Yeah.
Well, I imagine at Time Out. So that's a glorious thing. I thought I would send that. It's a nice thing to have, even nicer as a souvenir for me. But I thought I would send it to Russell T. Davis, if I can say his name.
Yeah.
Because did you watch It's a Sin?
No, I didn't see it. No.
I saw one of them. I thought it was terrific, actually.
It's just fantastic. Yeah. I mean, I think it's still on more 4, and it's I don't know. The reason I'm going to send it to him is partly because the whole AIDS era meant a huge amount to me working at Time Out. And I wrote a book about AIDS. And Russell, I think, and certainly some of the actors in It's a Sin used the book as kind of research, because it's a social document of the 80s, obviously. And he used that as sort of background research. And the book is now out of print. And Russell has kindly agreed to do the intro to the new edition, which is going to come out in December. And I suppose it's a book I'm sort of proudest of. Inevitably, it's a book that sold the least, because it's a document of young men just dying one after another. And it's a very grim thing. But the series, I kind of thought, okay, what's this going to be like? Is it going to be a bit, I don't know, is it going to be a bit exploitive? Is it going to be a bit tacky? Is it going to get it? And it did. Oh my God, it was just extraordinary, I thought. Right. And I thought, I'm going to feel old watching this as well. But I was just right back in there. And I thought it was an extraordinary thing. Anyway,
well, an amazing use of music too. The music was fantastic. I think.
The music was fantastic and spot on as well. And so it's on More Force. So absolutely recommend seeing that.
Right. But so you somehow ended up with a white label. I've never seen a white label of that. Because white labels are the big thing nowadays. They're the new trend in collecting. Did you know this? You probably got loads of. Oh yeah, I've only just found this out. I always thought white labels were valueless. Turns out not the case at all.
No, not the case at all. And it seems so surprising, because you think that it's the album sleeve with the kind of misprint on it, or it's the very early version that was then scrapped. That's got real editorial interest, but a white label never seems that thrilling to me. I know, it's just it's actually less thrilling than the real record. Yeah. But anyway,
but I can absolutely see. I mean, it's a kind of how many would they have?
But that's entirely what it's all about. It's just
like 100
not even that many, probably.
So I was, so it was always sort of nice to get. But I remember even at the time, when I was at Time Out, thinking when a white label came in, it did give you a sort of a frisson in a way, because you thought, well, you were, I mean, obviously, the song was already a month old by then, if not. I mean, it's been recorded like a month ago, whatever, and all the people at the record company had heard it, and all the family. But you felt somehow you were amongst the first.
Oh yeah,
hear it, and it was maybe going to, it was going with not this particular record, of course, but with a little bit of sort of marching powder and various other things in the early days to DJs and all of that kind of stuff. And then. So it was. I mean, I wish I'd kept more. Of course, it's always that way, isn't it? You think, we'll get more.
Didn't you? I'm trying to remember. Didn't you bunk off college for a while to follow the Clash around? Or am I imagining?
What happened was I was at Manchester for one term doing this. Goodness knows how, really. This course in management science, and I
sexy.
Sometimes in your life you think, how on earth did I get into that position? And it was one of those. I think my mum had been encouraged by her friends or something that this was a valuable course for me to do. And basically, it was hotel management. So the idea of being, I would have been a Basil Fawlty type, obviously, but the idea of sort of running a sort of Hilton somewhere, that was the option for me at that point. Right. Then what happened is my mum became unwell, and I came back down to London, and I changed my course to economic history, which is far more me. And then that sort of, informed everything else. But so at Manchester, I had no idea what I was doing. Even for the first term, I felt totally out of my depth. And the Clash came to town. This was 1978, and always loved the Clash. And I don't know whether you can see behind me, but I will move my head, and very shyly now there's a signed enough rope.
Right.
Here we go. There's no reason why we can't do this. So of course, they were coming to town. This is a glorious thing for me.
Gorgeous.
Really. And obviously everyone is on there.
Yeah.
And the thing I love about this as well, so they came to, it was HMV and they did a signing session up there. And what I love about this is, I mean, maybe he still does this now, is Mick Jones and then GTR, guitar, as if you didn't know. Really.
As if you didn't know, yeah, exactly.
As if you kind of thought, and Nicky Haddon didn't write drums.
Yeah,
Paul Simon
didn't
BS. Write bass.
Yeah.
No. Anyway,
just have a Vox.
Yeah. So there we go. Get that straight. So anyway, so what happened was they were HMV and they were playing. I should know. I should really know this. It was sort of. It was the Manchester Apollo, whatever it was called then. I mean, it might have been the Apollo even then, and they were fantastic. And it was that tour where they were getting slightly better, and so they were slightly less. They were more in tune. They were definitely more professional. They had all the CBS money behind them. I know that wasn't, the best album or anything, but it was exciting to see them. Incredibly exciting. And I'd seen them once before at the Rainbow, where seats were being. I mean, they still had seats at the Rainbow, and they were being ripped up as you sat in them by people behind, and that was great. But anyway, so I saw them then, and I thought, I can't do this course anymore. And they were then going for. They were going on a tour wherever they went. I can't really remember where it was. So I did. I spent a couple of weeks sort of cashing in my grant and spending all my grant, following them on train trips and sleeping in kind of B&Bs and just turning up in, wherever it was. I think I went as far as Glasgow at one point. I mean, easy to check this actually, because obviously there will be a list online. And just turning up. Obviously, you couldn't book in advance. I didn't, there were no phones, no internet. So you just turn up. And I never got to meet them. And I sort of didn't want to, even at that stage. I mean, you know about this. I mean, sort of meeting your heroes. Have you been disappointed by people you've met?
I wouldn't say disappointed. I wasn't.
Were you disappointed by Dylan, Dave?
No, he's all the Bob Dylan you could possibly imagine.
Yeah.
And I've always had the theory about this, that you can only ever be impressed by people who were famous when you were young. Because you continue looking up to them. Whereas
it's impossible to have heroes who are older
younger
than you. Rather younger than you.
You can't do it,
Yeah.
You can't hero worship in that way.
Yeah.
But no, I've never been particularly disappointed, but I've never had great expectations either. I realize it's a lottery, and it's a strange way that you meet these people. Well, particularly in our line of work, you're the writer, but who has to pretend to be a friend, and they have to pretend to be your friend for the duration of the interview. It's a really odd thing.
I can remember being very disappointed by interviewing Lou Reed, and then I thought after, because he was so cold and unaccommodating. Then after I thought, well, actually, surely cold and unaccommodating is exactly what you want.
It's on brand.
That's on brand. That's the Lou Reed I really was expecting to meet. Why did I think he was suddenly going to melt and go? You and I should go for a pint. So it happens.
I had one of those similar experiences. So when I was at Time Out, Joni Mitchell came to town. And she was up in some posh hotel, the Savoy or the Ritz,
right,
or whatever. And why wouldn't you want to go and see Joni Mitchell? And
she's terrifying.
Well,
that is why. So basically, what happened was, I said, fine. I'm not even sure I knew about this reputation. But talk about a childhood hero. And Blue is still one of the all-time. If I had a top 10, that would be in the top 10.
Yeah.
So, of course, I go along, and and I quite naive, and I'm 26 or whatever, and it's a suite at this hotel in London with a grand piano in it, and six or seven of her management team, closest friends, PR, everything else, kind of.
God, how intimidating!
Which is terrifying.
It is.
And so I say in a kind of, as nice a language as I can muster, is there any way we could just talk alone? Because I didn't want an audience. Sure. This was before the time of John Wilson saying, "No, come and watch me interview whoever it is." Right, this was kind of, and I felt in a way, you want to have a more intimate thing and everything else, because otherwise she'd be playing to the camera or playing to her friends or just not concentrating or whatever. Anyway, there's no way that anyone was going to leave that room. So I thought, okay, fine. Then what happens is I get half an hour of personal attack on me for the review I did of a Joni Mitchell album that had come out 2 weeks before or something. So that's why she was in town. And it was a very flattering review, but there were some words in there that clearly hadn't been, sort of up to par for Joni. And I'd used some adjectives that she didn't agree with. And
so they weren't 100% superlative. I mean, they were just...
Well, they were. It was certainly a flat. I don't know. Now it would. Let's say it was a kind of a 4-star review. Yeah. I certainly didn't slag it off, and I wouldn't. They would have cancelled the interview. Had that been the case. So it certainly wasn't that. No, I just said I don't know. I long lost in the mist of time. Thank God, but I should maybe pull it out now because the embarrassment has almost begun to fade.
I don't know if you've quite recovered, but
I know exactly.
You're still awake at night.
Isn't it remarkable, though, that even Joni Mitchell, for crying out loud, Joni Mitchell cares disproportionately what somebody writes in a kind of middling review in Time Out, It's just absolutely astonishing.
But as you said, with Lou Reed, totally on brand.
Yes.
And you kind of think at the end, I was shaken. I really was, because obviously, not only had I been dressed down by the words, but dressed down in front of everyone else.
In front of absolutely. Yes. That's why she wanted to see you in front of her mate.
Yeah,
this is me getting even with the press.
Yeah, exactly. And I assume, it would have been odd had I not been on that traditional half an hour, and then someone from the enemy, and then someone from Belgian radio. Yeah. So there was a whole day. So I'm sure this wasn't the case, but I hope that I looked at the poor person coming in after me on that production line and just shook my head and said, "Good luck, good luck."
Yeah, I wouldn't bother, mate.
Oh dear. No, she can be out. Well, I've never interviewed her, but she clearly can be a terrifying figure.
Yeah, but those PR days, I don't, I don't do hardly any music interviews now. Partly because I always found them so hard. I always found writing about music hard, which is why I wrote which is why I wrote about the music industry. But you guys have done it in one form or another kind of all your life. I mean, now
people never finish up writing about music, which is very hard. As Dave was saying, you tend to finish up writing about the people who make the music, because that's a kind of factual thing and it's something you can describe and has character and idiosyncrasy. But writing about music, an abstract thing, very, very hard indeed.
But it's interesting to see the change in the way that kind of musicians are interviewed, because the fact that you even suggested that the other people shouldn't be in the room indicates that in those days, most of the time, it was just you and the artists in the room, and it was quite personal. And whereas increasingly nowadays, PRs want to sit in, and then you get this kind of, so many things are done via Zoom and other pieces of technology nowadays, where there may be multiple people listening in.
And occasionally chipping in.
A
voice would say, "We're not talking about that." That's right. Yeah.
I did a thing with Cat Stevens not long ago. And at some point, a voice went, "Mention so-and-so," or whatever. Well, you thought, for crying out loud, this is Cat Stevens, for God's sake. He doesn't need his hand holding by 25-year-old PR or whatever, and I think people lose a lot of points by doing that kind of thing,
Yeah, I mean, I've sort of I'm not sure that this is absolutely spot on, but I began writing about music and interviewing people, let's say 1980. And then 10 years after that, when I didn't write very much about music and I didn't interview very many people about it, the whole scene seemed to have changed. So in that 10 years, I remember being able to ask pretty much anyone anything. You could get to people far more easily. I mean, it was still hard to get to, David Bowie, but, on the whole, people seemed to be more accessible. The PRs were facilitators rather than sort of
absolutely
censors or gatekeepers.
They arranged the time and place. Yeah.
Yeah. And there was that. And obviously there was a lot more cash involved as well. You would be flown all over. And that for me, I mean, I did enjoy that stuff. And that's sort of what I miss. I did love just flying out to LA to interview, Ice-T or someone. I mean, those kind of things, or there's, I don't know. I loved all that stuff. And now I kind of think how lucky I was. And I tell people, young people, these tales, and they said, God, what you spent a whole week with U2, and I said, yeah, that was sort of okay then, and it wasn't for an official book. No, it was just.
And then we talk about this, the idea that we actually saw the world through. I mean, I look at maps of Europe and think, wow, Berlin with Sniff and the Tears, Marseille, Buzzcocks, and you travel all over the world.
The Isle of Man with Nazareth.
That's true, I did.
That was the thing, wasn't it? That the more exotic the location, usually the worse the band.
Less glamorous.
Absolutely. Because they would always say to you, would you like to interview whoever it was? It'd be some sort of early version of Cabaret Voltaire or something. And you'd say, I'm not so sure. And he said, well, you could do it in Reading, or we could go next week, we could go to Texas and have a week. Eat a bit of barbecue, drink some beer, see how you get on with the boys. I know, ridiculous.
So, what was the best? What was the best trip you went on in those days? What's the memorable one?
Well, I think the U2 thing was an extraordinary thing. That was only, as far as I know, it was just the East Coast of America, and they were playing Madison Square Gardens.
Right.
Garden for 3 gardens. Garden.
What year was this then? Are we in the 90s?
We are in Time Out days.
So
80s, mid-80s.
Yeah.
And they were already absolutely huge. And it was extraordinary, I think, for the access. And I love the band and I love the music. Wonderful PR who may still be involved with a band called Regine
Bullet.
Oh, yeah. Wonderful.
It's a lovely girl.
Yeah. It was the sister of Johnny Fingers of the Boomtown Rats.
Right. And so I just remember this thing where I kind of think, okay, this was me as a total, the word wasn't used then, fanboy, in the limousine coming back from the gig, okay, with all 4 members of the band having done that Beatles thing of rushing from the stage, maybe a decoy car, which you run through or something.
Yeah, the final chord still resounding,
Exactly.
And they have to say, you two have left the
Still
building.
people waiting for an encore. Saying,
waiting for the 4th encore. And then it was a huge moonroof of this car and the band popping. I mean, they were thrilled with the performance. I mean, what an extraordinary thing, And they were popping champagne corks out of the moonroof.
Oh,
and I thought that was great. And then I wrote a piece which I thought was incredibly nice. Again, Bono took incredible exception to, wrote about it in the end, but spoke about it in the NME, said, I will never talk to Simon Garfield again. He will never gain access.
Can you remember what you said?
Was it about just one thing that you said or you quoted?
Okay, so what I said was, at one particular gig, Bono was looking tired, exhausted. It was maybe the second or third gig in the run or whatever. And he had spots. Okay.
Okay.
And now, unfortunately, it wasn't the spots. It was the fact that he thought the spots meant that I was somehow anti-Irish. So it was a racial slur.
Oh, my Lord.
Yeah, or a geographical slur.
How thin-skinned the rock star is. Here we are, Joni Mitchell, Bono. I know.
I didn't know we'd be talking about this, obviously. So I realized somehow we again, you know, I do it myself or get a researcher and find that clip. It was an extraordinary thing. So, and I like the band still. I actually really do like the last two albums. I did go and see them on my own ticket. On my own dosh at the where was it? Kind of the O2 Arena, you know, 3 years ago.
Did you make sure you sat far enough back that Bono wouldn't see you from the stage?
You out in the audience and say, "We will not carry on until that man's removed." Yeah.
Anyway, so it was. It was.
The limos. So you must have gone out of Madison Square Garden via the ramp, going up to the street level.
God, I don't know. I mean,
That's so exciting.
I was so excited. But then, you know, other things as well. I mean, I you can tell I'm still a fanboy because what I like is, you know, the backstage access, the sort of the hey wapping and the incredible stuff. So when I was doing my Radio 1 book, just a wonderful, because I had essentially a kind of Radio 1 pass to Glastonbury. Timely, we're talking about this, of course, and just being on the side of the pyramid stage on that podium that you see where people are looking down for kind of every band and any band was fantastic. And being backstage was fantastic. I mean, you've done this, so
I've done that. Yeah, I've stood on the side of the stage at Glastonbury.
You've presented from Glastonbury, presumably.
No, never presented from Glastonbury. But if you stand on the side of the stage, you get the impression of what it's like to be. Well, you're only going to be 20 or 30 feet to your right in front of a microphone stand, and you can see the crowd of whatever it is, 70,000 people, and you get a very clear sensation of what it'd be like to go out and perform to them. And that is thrilling. It's absolutely overpowering.
That was amazing. The other thing that I can remember, just because it's formed that vision in my head, is that I suppose the current sort of white indie guitar band that I like most, apart from Arctic Monkeys now, is the National, who I've always loved. I mean, classic, you know. If you were into the Smiths, the chances, and that theatre has now all gone dark, of course. You're now into the National. So they were great, and we were. I was actually, I think, not performing, but I was doing a sort of a spoken word little gig in front of 30 people, if that. At Latitude, and the National were headlining. This was, I don't know, 5 years ago, 6 years ago or something. And we were camping there or there very early. And we woke up at about 9 a.m. and we heard this sound and we thought that sounds like the National. And of course, the National was sound checking. They'd flown in and they were sound checking at a time where everyone else was fast asleep or just getting their bacon baps or whatever it was. So we went to the big stage that was cordoned off, I think, but because we had a pass with my wife, and they did a long sound check, 6 songs, and it felt like they were just performing to me and Justine, my wife, and it was an extraordinary thing as well. So that was a kind of more recent thing. Again, it's that feeling of connected to, I think, a band that you like and a musician that you like. But you're right, David. I mean, they're not, you know, you can spend a week with whoever and they're not your friends, and it is a parallel universe, and quite good that is the case, I think.
Oh no, absolutely. Definitely. No, it's fascinating, this business about being on the side of the stage or in the limo and all this stuff, because it gives you a taste of why they do it. and why they keep on doing it. Because that's
why it's so hard to give up.
That's a powerful drug. That's more powerful than anything else, you know.
Yeah, extraordinary. But then you also get a glimpse of actually how hard it is.
Oh yeah,
as well.
Yeah,
you do, but you realise that just so much of what's involved in being in a band, particularly a band touring, is so much anxiety actually, and so moments like that coming off stage, you know, you can see why it's so compelling and why you would never want to give it up.
And that whole, you know, thing of the sound check, well, the getting to the venue, you know, initially in the transit van or the Morris Minor or whatever it is, and then getting to a thing, and then it's it. But even when you're in the plane, even when you're in the private jet, it's still a grueling experience. More grueling, you know, and it's absolutely. I mean, what was that Cameron Crowe film called?
Almost Famous.
Almost Famous. And I thought that got it right. I thought
it did.
Was fantastic, really, yeah.
It did. It was brilliant. So, have you got any more stuff there to show us? Have you got records or any things?
So
what have you got?
So I got out a whole pile of singles here, and so there's more. You know, there is some more Clash, and there's this and coloured vinyl of The World Turned Day.
Oh, nice. Lovely.
At the bottom of the pile, now we're getting to the serious business, and you know, I mentioned trains and stuff earlier.
Yeah.
So. And I've been a collector all my life, and some of the books I've done kind of reflect that. And I suppose if you're a writer, if you're a book writer, you collect information. What I collected when I was a kid were these. I don't know how else to explain them. So can you read this?
Oh, they're recordings of trains.
Wow,
on the Argo label.
So correct.
So they're not sound effects. They're soundtrack, yeah.
So this is a good one.
Oh, those are lovely.
This is a good one. And the names, can you read? There we go.
On the push and pull.
On the push and pull.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we have who doesn't like an exhibitionist engine?
Oh, that's marvellous.
So two more from them after the news.
So these are incredible things because, well, for all sorts of reasons. So this guy called Peter Hanford, total one-man band did this enterprise. A guy called Peter Hanford was obviously train obsessed. And he would go out, this is 1964, 1965. He would go out with a microphone and a reel-to-reel at 3 a.m. and stand, you know, at Grantham or on a hillside somewhere and just record these trains. And there must have been, I don't know, I think there probably, if I was to say like 80 of these, I think that would be about right.
So what was the feeling you got listening to Exhibitionist Engines? How did you feel?
Well, I felt two things. One, I thought this is a wonderful thing because you feel you were there, and you kind of think, even though I was, I'm there under the old trains before the diesels and the electrics came in, and I'm not really I was never a train spotter as such. Maybe I was a bit too late for the golden. Well, I certainly was too late for the golden age. But I love the romanticism of it, and I love imagining the romanticism of it. And it is that sort of brief encounter kind of element. There is something about a train.
Yeah.
Maybe more for men, but there is something about a train, an old train, and it's that romance. And whenever I sit on a train, my mind just enters this sort of freer space, I suppose. I just imagine different things. It's always very good if I'm stuck on a bit of writing, or if I'm looking for a new idea, I always find it just somehow freeing and inspiring. So I like that.
That was so well put. That maybe more for men, but
maybe more for men. But the other thing I liked was the obsessional element of it. Was imagining Peter Hanford going round just up and down the country, and obviously there was a market for this, but the best thing is the sleeve notes. So obviously we know about the value of sleeve notes and what we've missed and what's coming back and all of that. But you can see here, I hope, I mean, you won't be able to read it, but you can see there's a lot of text.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good read. It's a thumpy good read there.
You're getting your money's worth.
Can I just read you? I mean, this is, okay, so what shall I pick? I will pick With the Mail to Aviemore, okay, a different one here. So I just want to read, so I'm just going to read a section from side 1. Okay, obviously double-sided.
Yeah.
This is just now climbing at 1 to 80. The train approaches Strahan. A very brief stretch of 1 to 300 through is followed by still rising gradients of 172 and 180. Some 8 miles from Blair Atoll, near Down the Rock signal box, the climb is now on a gradient of 170, and on it goes.
Brilliant. You can imagine Vic Reeves rubbing his hands on his knees here.
It's for, so I didn't know, certainly when I bought them, and even now, as you can tell, I guess from the way I read it out, I'm not a train nut in that way. I don't care about gradients, but I love the fact that someone does.
I agree with you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And also,
you applaud other people's enthusiasm.
Yes, I got the singles, but this is nothing because he says, reaching out.
He's got a box set.
The albums.
Oh, right.
And so what is this one? Trains to Remember. But they're all Trains to Remember. And then you've got a lot more going on there.
Oh,
and
wonderful.
There are a lot of these as well. So this has, band 5. I don't know how long this lasts, but it's a long time. And then obviously you've got all this wonderful. No, there's no more sleeve, but the Argo label anyway. So
yeah,
the Argo label.
Great. I'm trying to think what else I've got for you here. So this is fun. I always liked when I was at Time Out. I always liked. I mean, obviously, we talked about the trips. I always liked a freebie. Obviously, who doesn't? But what I really liked are the ones where people had said, "Okay, so how do we make this free item, this promotional item, sort of chime in with what we're trying to sell?" So, prime example: Elvis Costello, "The Only Flame in Town" single in a Zippo lighter.
Oh, wow.
That's great.
So how good is that? And then it says on it, just Elvis Costello and the Attractions with Dowell Hall, who was obviously on the record. It's still got, maybe you can hear this. Here we go. This is a thing for you. Can you hear this release of gas? No, it's too much wind. There's no way. But it does still have gas in it.
There's still gas.
It doesn't have, but the flint is
still dangerous.
Yeah, no, the flint,
Jake Rivera.
Sadly,
Flint's gone.
There's no flint. It's gone, I'm afraid. But I love. So I found that in a tray recently. I thought, okay, well, that's anything like. Have you got examples of?
Well, I'll tell you, it's funny one. I was just reminded me. We talk about Elvis Costello. When Elvis Costello put out Imperial Bedroom. So whenever that was, early 80s, I suppose, whoever was doing PR for it, no doubt acting on the instructions of Jake Rivera, because this idea's got Jake Rivera written all over it. He says, there's a hotel which has got an imperial bedroom. How about doing a competition with smash hits for readers to win a night in the imperial bedroom? And the hotel they were suggesting was opposite Finsbury Park. Now, I don't know if you know that area of London. It was not a place that you would send a 15-year-old,
12-year-old girl. That's right.
Spend a night on your own.
Duran Duran
the
fan.
imperial bedroom. I said no. I don't think we'll be doing that.
No.
Thank you very much. But they were very much ones for that kind of tie-in, imperial bedroom.
Yeah, exactly.
I think Dave and I both used to have a Reckless Eric brick, didn't we, Dave? Do you remember?
Big Smash.
Big Smash.
It was the cheapest promotional toy ever.
With
they
Big
just bought a
Smash,
load of
Reckless Eric
bricks and
on
they
it.
painted Big Smash on the side of it and gave it to a load of...
It wasn't thrown through the office.
That was the joke. It
That
could
was
have
only
been
after the review. Yeah.
But those, I'm trying to think if there were any more, really. I mean, that goes back. I mean, this kind of thing just reminds me of going back to when I was like, 6 or 7 and getting Whizzer and chips or the Beezer and getting a free gift.
Exactly.
That was
it's almost things free in cornflakes packets.
Oh,
I know.
Exactly. The last thing that I've got from the hall, from the lockdown hall, is this. So.
All right.
Lovely.
Now, which is an old tranny. Now, why I kept this in the box, I don't know really, because everything else got thrashed. But it's here's the thing, rather beautiful thing. It's only got one band. It's so which I assume is sort of medium wave. AM. But what I love is and God, I'm glad I kept it. Really horrible Morrissey type. Sort of yellow.
They're NHS, those are.
Yeah, it's a hearing aid, isn't it? Yeah. Very painful. Insert that in your ear and you'll pierce the eardrum and
exactly.
Be deaf for life.
And really, really nasty. Oh, right.
Very nasty.
To strap onto your belt. That's right.
I'm okay. So when I went to watch, sort of when I was running from the West Ham, sort of aggro boys when I was a child. When I went to stand on the terrace at Chelsea rather than, in expensive seats, I would have this. I think, but I was
to amuse yourself in the 2 hours between getting in the ground and the match starting.
Exactly,
because that's what happened.
But obviously, what happened was you wanted to hear what was happening.
Oh, they're at half time.
Yes.
But what is great about this? Well, and it's not so great because it's, but it plays. It works.
It still works.
It still picks up Tony Blackburn and Arnold.
Luxembourg.
Exactly. It only plays
Simon Bates with his snooker program.
Simon Bates is doing snooker on the radio. No, it's DLT, wasn't it?
Oh, DLT. Sorry, DLT. That's right.
It still only plays the dinosaurs from Radio 1.
There you go.
Yeah.
So, Simon, plug your latest book. You may as well while you're on this.
I may as well. This is a real labour of love. I will even grab it because it has such a lovely jacket. Here we go.
Dog's great.
It's called Dog's Best Friend, and it has. I'll show you my favourite picture in here as well. This is this one that I don't know. I absolutely love. Can you see that?
Yes.
The worm and that. So it's basically this is so it came about because I was talking to my editor and she said, well, what do you fancy doing next? And I kind of thought, well, I've always been very lucky that I've always been able to. I always say, I always felt I was getting an education. When I looked at typefaces or maps or whatever, I was always very interested in those things. But I kind of wanted to know more, and then I could put that in the book. Great. And with this, it was just a love, really. So I've had dogs all my life. My current dog, Ludo, who I'm surprised actually isn't up here, under my feet now, having had his walk. He's now an aging gent. He's almost 14, a black lab. Right. And I kind of thought, especially during lockdown, although the idea came about actually before then, but what a wonderful thing to write about. So why do we live with dogs rather than the possum or the eagle or whatever? And there are obvious answers to that, but also the thinking was, who's on top? Who's top dog now? It's sort of, so having had that symbiotic relationship with dogs for about 10 or 15,000 years, we now take the dog to the cinema. There is a cinema in Balham which shows dog-friendly movies, and you go with your dog, and they keep the lights a little bit higher, all that kind of stuff.
They show dog-friendly films? No.
Well, they show Lady and the Tramp or Irish dogs.
The Incredible Journey.
Oh, Lord, Journey, yeah, that's right.
Exactly. So I kind of thought, well, how has it come to this? How do I admit to buying a memory foam bed for my dog. How do we get to that point where I'm spending 250 quid on a dog bed?
Because it's so expensive nowadays, isn't it?
It's that. So, but also how important they are in my life and our lives. So it's a kind of breakneck tour, I suppose, through 15,000 years of our relationship. And then it asks some serious things at the end, which is, or throughout, I suppose, which is sort of, are we losing the sort of dogness of dogs? The essential quality. Are we making them too human to fit in with our needs? The way we crossbreed them, the way we show them, the way
cinemas,
quite, and the way we pamper them. And is that sort of too much? Is that good for the dog? Yeah. And then lockdown happened, and everyone tried to get a dog. Dogs became the hot commodity.
Dog theft was a thing, wasn't it?
Dog theft, and the price went through the roof, and some terrible breeding practices went on as well, which obviously existed before, but were really sort of, accentuated during all of that. And then, but of course, people realized, and also it was the time so you were at home with your kids and you couldn't resist that I want a dog, please get a dog. Unless you would finally give in.
So that was the time when you gave in. It never occurred to me that.
Yeah, so that was that. And also
to help the kids do their homework or whatever. Yeah.
Well, and also you think, well, if I'm at home, this is the perfect time to train a dog. The big question now, and it's a serious one, it sounds bizarre, is how dogs are going to react psychologically, especially if they're young pups that have just been bought in the last year, how they're going to react now from, that sort of transformation from having owners around all the time.
Yeah, 100% attention. That's true.
For people now going back to
and being walked 15 times a day, presumably.
Yeah, exactly. They're so they might think, God, thank God they're finally leaving the house, those owners.
Yes.
Or they may think, hang on a minute, where's my love? And so interesting. So dog psychologists, dog behaviorists, and there are a lot of those, are now trying to battle through. And the other great sort of boom industry in the dog world has been dog training as well, online training. So people would get dogs and they would think, hang on a minute, I've got no idea what to do here at all. Normally you would go out and I taught, there's a nice bit in the book where I talk to this very, very self-opinionated, but very, very good woman dog trainer in Camden. And I go and see her. And she says inevitably, the problem isn't the dog, it's the owners. Sort of 90% of behavioral problems in dogs are the problems of owners. So obviously the online boom now in dog training, anyway, it goes on, but it was a really nice thing to do.
Well, we always traditionally tend to end with people's nominations for the greatest record ever made. So have you got anything you'd like to promote in that category?
I can only, I suppose I would take the Desert Island Discs angle on this, and it, obviously how do you define the greatest record? I can only talk about it in personal terms.
Absolutely.
Sort of how it affected me, and just the first Clash album. So it's not the greatest record ever made. It's it wouldn't be in the top 10 if you looked at normal criteria, and be that production, lyrics, anything else. But the impact it had on me and a lot of other people was huge. So I remember listening to that. Nicky Horn played it a lot on Capital Radio. I sort of remember him playing it more than Peel. And I don't know whether this would only chime with viewers in London of a certain age as well. Is that Nicky Horn was on Capital Radio before Peel came on, and that was the real time that I kind of remember hearing that, and that was before I saw them and everything. And I just thought it was the coolest thing. And obviously it was the time of the Notting Hill riot. So you had that big picture on the back and all that kind of stuff. So I'd say the album, and I was 17 when that came out. So it's perfect. You know, that absolutely, it's just there for life if it's there. So that, I think that was the one for me. If I had to pick the one that I think has lasted most, that I still play. So I don't really play the first Clash album because it's, you know, it's angry and it's obviously very immature, and it is a bit like kids are throwing tantrums half the time. But the one I think that that I will always love is Blood on the Tracks. And, you know, presumably others have picked that, have they, in the past?
I don't know if anybody has.
They have, actually. No, but it's a fantastic record.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, kind of all of that. I love, you know, I've always been a big Dylan fan. There's a wonderful kind of bootleg version of that, which I think again has now been officially released.
They all have.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Where in Tangled Up in Blue, for instance, the narrator goes from he to I, and that's great as well. It's fantastic hearing all those early versions and transitions, but every song on that album for me holds up, you know. I think that's right. The only other, this is sort of coming full circle to what we were saying earlier. This is just the only other thing about meeting your heroes. I kind of remember this is that when Bob Dylan played in Israel, which was a huge thing because no one knew, you know, he was obviously Jewish, but then he was Christian for a week, and then he was back to Jewish for another 3 weeks, and then anyway that changed. But he played in Israel, and this was a momentous thing for Israel. It was like, I mean, thank God, we've just had the ceasefire, and we are in, you know, tumultuous times. There always are in Israel in a way. Yeah. There's always political turmoil, and I have a family connection there. I had an aunt there. I've got a cousin there now. So when he played Israel in, I want to say 76, but perhaps that's wrong. That's not right. That can't be right. That 86 perhaps. I went along just to report on the gig. And I thought, okay, so that's all I can do. I wasn't going to get to him. But I had some connections and some friends there. And so I'm just thinking it probably even wasn't the 80s, but we can check that out. And a friend said, oh, I know which hotel he's at. And I thought, okay, well, look, you know, how often is he in Israel? Maybe he's in kind of talking mode. Unlikely, I would have thought. But so I went to the hotel, and he was up there, and I was in reception. And I thought what I would do is send up a note to his management team and just say, look, I'm here, and you don't know me. My name is Simon Garfield, and I'd love to interview Bob. What a fantastic thing for him, for Israel, and everything else. So, you know, the note goes up. I'm hanging out in the lobby waiting for a reply. The note comes down, unlikely to be in his handwriting, but who knows, which says, as in the cat, ? And that's it. So he's obviously cottoned on to the Garfield element of it. Oh. And, yeah, it took a while.
I couldn't think. I was supposed to do with curiosity. I couldn't work it out. Yeah,
that's very Bob Dylan.
Very Bob Dylan.
That could be him. Let's believe it is him. I want it.
I'm going to tell you what he. When I interviewed him in '86, he had a huge, great dog in his dressing room, and I said to try and make small talk with Bob Dylan. Hopeless trying to make small talk with Bob Dylan. I said, "What's the dog called?" He says, that dog has no name. And then I went on to the next thing. And then he went, no, he's called Late for Dinner. That's so Bob Dylan. Crap joke that takes a little while to land. You know what I mean? Call me anything you like, but don't ever call me late for dinner. It's just like as in Garfield, as in the cat.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like, my wife is a tennis. What is it? My wife is a tennis umpire. Love means
nothing to her. That's right.
That's
Although he did have one very good gag, which is my wife and I were happy for 30 years, and then we met.
Yeah,
that's a good gag.
I
think one thing we can guarantee about Bob Dylan's 80th birthday, which is in the next few days, his sense of humor will not be sufficiently celebrated, I don't think. But I like to feel we've done our bit here today. Simon, thank you very much indeed.
Great to see you.
It's been lovely. Nice to see you.
A joy. Who doesn't like to talk about their old?
I know, it's lovely.
Their old crap, really.
Yeah.
Word in Your Attic, a Zoom with a View.